Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Change podcast, where we're challenging and reimagining OEHS. And so, in this podcast, we focus on highlighting income leaders in their field and how they got to where they are today, with a special focus on the field of occupational health and environmental sciences. But as always, we dip into other topics as well. And so, we're going to be talking about the hills and valleys of our speaker's journey, get some insight into the non-traditional path into the field. And so my name is Tara Parrish. I am a recent graduate from the MPH program here at Cal, and our guest speaker for this episode is Mulika Musyimi. I got it. So Mulika is originally from Kilifi, which is a small town in the coast province of Kenya. And he is the son of farmers, cooks, teachers, tailors, hotel workers, and storytellers. And he wants to acknowledge them and their impact because without them, there wouldn't be a story thread featuring him. In addition to having various relatives experience health challenges throughout his life, there was also realization that as a sub-Saharan African migrant living in a U.S. context, there was now this different exposure perspective of seeing and making sense of his surroundings. The markedly poor overall health outcomes experienced by Black communities on the continent and in the diaspora is dire and needs addressing, particularly because of the sum of stressors that social determinants of health place on an individual, a family, and a community. In short, these were some of his motivators in pursuing his MPH in global environmental health. So welcome, Mulika. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Tyra. It is so happy to be had. Thank you for your time.
Yes. Okay, so before we jump into the podcast, we're going to start with a check-in question. So the check-in question is, describe a family or individual tradition that holds a special place in your heart.
Ooh. This is tough because I come from a big family, so it is hard to take just one member. But if it was one tradition, which I think that will bring a lot of these characters into the foreground, is our grandfather used to be a choir master in church.
Oh, cool.
And when we lived together, because both he and my grandmother lived with us for a while, they would gather all of us after dinner and we would sing, or he would conduct us singing Kamba songs every single night before we prayed and went to bed. So this is one of those memories that I remember as a kid, because it was just the older folk plus us kids with my grandfather doing his thing.
Oh, I love that. That's so cute.
It's a story I haven't shared much, but it's needed to come out.
Oh, that's so cute. Okay, my tradition, or I guess family tradition that we would do is every Christmas or just even winter time. Since I don't even remember how old we were, but we watched Polar Express, the same movie. I love Polar Express.
Yes.
And when we were kids, we used to make the hot chocolate and be oh, hot chocolate. Like we literally would have it and like be watching that part. And so even now, like last Christmas, I was like, we're watching Polar Express, right? Like there's something about having something where it happens every time. Anyways.
I'm curious, real quick. Yeah. I guess I'm the one asking a quick question.
Yeah.
Why Polar Express? Of all the films, I'm just curious.
I think the first time we watched it, there was something about it that we all loved. And I think too that one of the main characters is like a Black girl, and that was super cool to see. And she was the one who like made sure to include the other kid. Like it was just cool.
Wow.
And she was the one who was keeping those kids together because they were running around acting crazy, and she was like, sit down. There was just something about it. And I think the music was good, the storyline was good. Yeah, and it was just one of those like, I actually don't know what it is about it, but every time I watch it, it like I pretend like it's brand new. I'm like, oh
wow. Guess who's about to watch Polar Express?
I love
September this weekend. I am.
Yes. It's so good. But yeah, it's definitely like a Let me know what you think, because it definitely can be. It's definitely a little corny, but it's like cute. I don't know.
There's no corny here.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah. All righty. So we're going to jump into the first question, which is walk us through how you got into the field of public health and particularly what drew you into environmental health.
Ooh, that's again another good question in the sense that I feel like I am one of those humans and lifelong students who took many paths to get to where they are. So for me, it was never direct. And I feel like a handful of things happened in my life that sparked that interest. One of them was growing up in a single parent home in Kenya. And my mother and my dad, when my dad was still alive, lived in a small rural town. So once he passed away, my mom needed to move in order to get better work in the city. So I guess my life period in Kenya was partly rural, partly city. But then fast forward to me migrating to the US and our grandmother developing memory loss and later became Alzheimer's. Those were some breadcrumbs that I guess were getting laid all throughout my life. I think work at the International Rescue Committee, which is a refugee resettlement agency, headquartered in New York, but has like different offices in the United States, also introduced me to facets of, refugee and migrant health.
Yeah.
Then COVID also happened, and also that contributed to, I guess, the bigger conversation. So for me, it was either directly through just watching my mom living through just the premature death of a parent as a result of like a heart attack, an elderly grandparent who was responsible for raising me, but also had Alzheimer's, a pandemic, and also just like experiences as a volunteer and also as an interpreter at the International Rescue Committee were all reasons why I ended up where I did.
Yeah. Well, one, thank you for sharing that with us, because I know that yeah, just thank you. Thank you for sharing like how you got there or how you got into public health. And so my follow-up question would be what drew you to the specific area of like global environmental health once you realized, okay, public health is for me? And then how did that kind of get you to Berkeley?
Yeah. So my undergrad degree at San Diego State,
Yeah.
go Aztecs,
Woo.
love the Bears, but also go Aztecs first.
Yeah.
Um, was environmental geography and sustainability. So in terms of like the environmental side of the program, I think that was already steeped just in undergrad. And I feel so strongly about just like the foundations that were laid for me in undergrad, just because it was the first big school that I'd ever attended in my whole life. It was also, the program was unique in the sense that I think it had professors who had just this way about how they viewed academia, how they had also driven their own careers in them becoming professors amongst all the other things that they did. And I think it's just like this sense of possibility I think they bestowed on all of us as students, that yes, you can get a geography degree, but a geography degree is more than just maps. It's just so much more than just like, the title of the degree. And I think it was just like those moments, that I was getting to connect with a handful of them that I think sparked this sense of like, I think wonder and possibility, because yes, I probably got into sustainability and environmental geography just because I grew up in a different place, and there was always a sense of wonder about what lies outside my postal code, my zip code, my country. But I feel like it was just like this other way of seeing my world and impacting my world through learning and through academia. And I think that made me realize that I could do something bigger. Then once the talk and the conversation of public health started to feel a little bit more real, that came from a mentor who I still look up to this day. He's a PhD student at UCSB,
Mm,
and that's the University of California, Santa Barbara. And he's a sociology student, and he was a valedictorian at SDSU. And I think
mm,
it's watching his journey and him, just the ability of him being a storyteller for himself, for his community, I think allowed me to look at this evolving interest in public health and feel that I could also contribute to it in my own unique way. Uh,
yeah,
I attended a workshop that UC Berkeley was holding for prospective students, and I remember watching um, a student, and I'm gonna give her a shout out. Her name is Lina Musoka, and
yeah,
she was a year ahead of me, and she was just talking about just how she ended up at Berkeley Public Health. She also happened to be a migrant as well, from a part of the world that I was also from. So I think just all these parallels for me were just confirming um that I needed to pursue a global environmental health degree, and if
yeah,
not at Berkeley, just somewhere else. So
yeah. Well, dang, you answered my next question, which was like any mentors and role models. You just shouted somebody out, period. Because I mean, like it's hard
I
to
have
talk about,
so many people to chat.
right,
No,
right.
please, please, please.
No, I was gonna say, shout them out. Like if there's anyone else that's been
Shout
like,
them out.
yeah, like in your journey to and
Oh
through
my
public
God.
health. Because yeah,
Oh my God. Yes, yes. I will reach back as far back as community college, because I
yeah,
am a product of community college. And if it was not for those foundational roots when I was still very, very young and a very new migrant in a very new society, attending US schools, I think I would not be where I am today. So I want to give a shout out to just my academic advisors in junior college in Reno, Nevada. They saw me, and they were able to like plant all these seeds. I want to shout out to my professors there, my professors at SDSU,
mm,
and Dr. Costello, um, Dr. Dr. Katie. Like I'm
yeah.
spacing
It's
out
a
on words
list.
right
Yeah.
now, but
No,
just
that's
like
okay.
and just like
Yeah,
every internship they dropped on my lap. They were willing
yeah,
to write letters of recommendations for me on just every single one of them. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And fast forward, then once I got accepted to UC Berkeley, and
yeah,
an ever-present mentor is Dr. J. Graham. And I want to give him like a huge shout out right now, because the man has calmed me down and he has helped
yeah,
me see the world um beyond schoolwork. So,
yeah. I will second that. Um, Jay is he was an anchor and still is an anchor for a lot of our class, the classes before, and the classes in the future. It's really hard to explain Jay's impact until you meet him, and when you meet him, you get it. Like he was an anchor for people who weren't even in our department, like they knew him. So definitely shout out to Jay. And also I want to highlight what you said about coming from a community college, because I feel that there's still kind of this belief that, or maybe misunderstanding of how impactful going to a community college is before like transitioning into a 4 year. Um, and so I want to take space, one, to highlight for folks who are listening and are thinking about options to go to school, um, that community college is a fantastic option in your pathway of education of any form or at any level you wish to reach for.
yes.
Um, and as someone who I've taken community college, that's helped me kind of like in regards to my degree, not stress.
Yes.
I loved community college a lot better, especially when you go to big UC schools. it's easier to connect with faculty and
Yes.
staff at a community college versus big schools like any school in the UC system. So want to uplift that because that's community college. I'm pro. I'm always pro.
Thank you for that, Tara. And I think for
Yeah.
me, honestly, that came later, to be quite honest, because I feel like initially maybe I just out of my youth and maybe my lack of inexperience, I didn't know better. And I thought initially that maybe I was going to a lesser institution.
Yes.
Now that I look back, that is not the case.
Yeah. No, but but I'll acknowledge that was something I had to grow into as well. Like I was totally on the don't like viewing colleges as lesser than comparatively when really that it's all education at any form and any level, and no one is better than someone else just based off of the university you go to, which I understand. Attending and graduating from UC Berkeley, we come from very like privileged position to be like, oh, Berkeley prestigious schools don't mean anything, but I genuinely mean that like no matter where you go, whether you go to Berkeley or whether you go to any other university, education is education at the end of the day.
Yes.
By any means. So yes. So now we're gonna shift into what you are currently doing now. So you already mentioned it, but so before we talk about your human rights fellowship that you are still in right now, so cool. Can you talk about your present work as an interpreter / facilitator at the International Rescue Committee in San Diego? And then can you also define the definition between translator and interpreter? Those are two different things.
Yeah, absolutely. First, before I forget, I just want to call out or shout out to Trevor Aldridge. He is my mentor from UCSB. And I just want to mention because without Trevor, I would not know how to write a statement of purpose. So
oh my goodness.
I want to give him that space and that acknowledgement because without him as a mentor, really probably wouldn't even have finished writing my statement of purpose. All right. To answer this question.
No, shout out Trevor. I love that.
Shout out to Trevor. So to answer this question, the difference between an interpreter and a facilitator is that a facilitator is a person who makes a process easier within an organization. So in the roles that I was able to play this part at the International Rescue Committee, that was either as a co-ESL teacher or a co-CPR teacher.
Gotcha.
Co-DMV test taker, just because these are situations where migrants and refugees, because of just like the way things are worded or just like situational processes that might be just harder, even English speaking person are hard. So just a facilitator in those settings and those contexts just make it a lot more easier. Interpreters, on the other hand, work with oral and sign languages as opposed to translators who deal with like written language. And as an interpreter, like you're often translating language on the fly and like in the context of like real conversation. So again, that was a hat that I also wore. And sometimes like accompanying like one of our clients to a doctor's visit. Again, those sometimes are happening on the fly, and just feeling capable to be able to like grasp what the client is trying to communicate aptly, and also making sure that the doctor understands exactly what the client is trying to say. Like those were the things that I had to really work with sometimes. So
and I want to add on to what you said in regards to the difference between like a translator and an interpreter, only because I feel that sometimes I'll speak to like healthcare settings or even just settings where like let's say like a team setting where someone knows that someone there is like multilingual, being a translator and being an interpreter, like you said, two different things where you're having to, interpreters more so interpret to the context of the conversation. And so you're literally having to actively like translate whatever you're hearing and then communicate that in a way in which that group understands and the other group or whatever groups understand. And translating is just you remove the context and these are the things I'm seeing or hearing or reading, and I'm just writing it like as is without putting any context. No, I wouldn't say putting any context, but it's kind of like you said, where it's like words. You're simply translating it, while interpreting is kind of like in the context of a hospital setting or in a doctor's space, you may have to interpret it like, do you understand like your rights in this conversation or in this space? And that doesn't mean that one is harder than the other. It's just a different approach. And so that's why sometimes I had to learn this because someone told me where they've had to advocate for themselves to get pay that is equal to that of an interpreter and not a translator because of the labor that comes with that. But they just assume, oh, you speak XYZ language, just translate it. And it's just like, oh. Anyway, so that's the reason why I asked one to highlight from someone's personal experience of being an interpreter, and then highlighting those differences for folks who are maybe in that space or being asked to translate or interpret, but not being fairly compensated. Please advocate for yourself. And there's also, I think, a certification you can get as an interpreter as well. So,
and I feel like for me, one thing that becomes more and more clear in this work is just how hard the process of leaving one's comfortable home, and I'm gonna say comfortable right now, actually with quotation marks, because, and maybe what I should have said is the process of coming from a setting and a context that one is familiar with, and that could be a country, a language, a region, a space, and moving into a completely different context, in this case, the United States, and trying, one, to assimilate, and two, coping with every other thing that is bombarding one as a newcomer. And I think for me, that is, as I go through the process of interpreting, is I just want to give a shout out to, our clients, because it is not easy, and constantly like having to navigate these very difficult, hard spaces where sometimes individuals can, on this other side, can get very impatient with the process. And just like the process is not easy. It's not easy for native English speakers. So it's even twice, if not harder, for English is not their first language. So again, I sit back in awe, but also want to just give space to just like these amazing individuals that go through traumatic experiences most of the time, to just create new homes and just.
Right. Well, I also want to uplift you for being a part of making that process not as challenging as it's going to be, because that's amazing. And so now I want to transition into your experience as a human rights fellow at, saying this right, Sanergy?
Sanergy, exactly.
Sanergy, cool. Collaborative in Nairobi, Kenya. So how was that?
Eye-opening, instructive, humbling. And the reason why I choose these three words is because going into this space, even when I was selected, even when I was selected as a fellow to participate in this fellowship, I knew I was also coming in very green, in the sense that I had not truly worked in a traditional water and sanitation and hygiene space. So I knew I was coming in with a lot of learning that I needed to do. But the fact that, one, they gave me an opportunity, I purposed to make it as immersive and as enriching as far as new knowledge is concerned as anyone could possibly make it to be in a period of 3 months. And I think also for me, it was it was important for me to be in a space where like meaningful wash work happens, because this is the type of work that I've professed that I want to do. And just like being in a context where like 60% of people that live in Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya, don't have access to um, to easy accessible sanitation in the traditional way, or at least in the way where we imagine it, in a context like Oakland or like San Francisco. Again, was really, really eye-opening, because when you think of like 60% of a city's population is not using a sanitation modality that you and I can say, oh yeah, like I flushed it and it went somewhere. Again, for me, that was it was important to see that type of work. It was important to see where the work happens, particularly like in the informal settlements that it seeks to serve and also uplift. Two, it was also addressing a gap that is a right that is provided within the Kenyan Constitution, that says every Kenyan should have right to this service. But again, having lived in that context prior to me migrating to the US, and also going back to see that it hasn't changed, was also instructive. Three, the fact that also government, or the systems of government, have also been devolved, in the sense that we do have a national government that sets laws and sets policies, but again, the county governments also do governance separate from the national government. So the fact that the two are decoupled, so whatever might be happening in the national federal level might not be the exact story happening like county governments, was also really nice to be exposed to, because the Constitution changed when I was away. So this is the 10th year that the Constitution has actually been in operation. So I think also just like seeing the mechanics of like these big visions that were set up like in 2010, and actually now 10 years later, people can say like, this is working, this is not working, I think was also instructive for me, and also just humbling, like being in these spaces where sometimes I just needed to listen.
Yeah. And I really like, I think one, only because I know like the background of when you got the fellowship, I just want to highlight that like, from what I know about Mulika, this was literally exactly what he asked for, manifested in his life. And so one, this is my first time hearing about what happened during his fellowship. And it's always just, it is amazing, one, to see like, it's amazing to hear that not only that you're doing global work, but that you're able to do global work back in your home country, and to still be around family. But then also I really loved how you shared that even in your time in the US and then coming back, how it had changed. So then you're kind of in a space of learning also in your home community, which is really cool. So I just really enjoyed hearing that, and I want to uplift that. I'm so happy that you had a good time up there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was, and it was also challenging as well, because I think also one thing I'm also learning is it's easy for me to call out just the good times and the successes, but I think for this conversation of ours to be also very authentic, I also want to call out the fact that it was also hard, because like having not known what it means to be a team member in a functioning group already, right? Like I was the new member showing up in a team that had already been working on a few projects, and also just trying to find where I truly fit and where I can contribute the most was challenging at times. I think so too, in as much as I am culturally Kenyan, I've also been removed. I've for a couple of years. So I think it's also trying to reestablish, what my identity is, going back to my culture, and also doing that in a work setting was also a little bit difficult. Three, there were just things also within my goals that I had set out that I'd mentioned in my essay before I got accepted, and also just goals to keep myself on track. Some of those goals were not met. So just like knowing how to pivot or communicate them.
Yeah.
Those were also difficult moments. So I think also acknowledging that in this podcast session, I think is also
Yeah.
important. I don't want to just highlight the fact that it was all good.
Yeah. And you know what? That's so real because this is a side note, y'all. Me and Malika went to this really great meeting on it's called Decolonizing Global Health, I believe.
Speak tire.
And yes, and gosh, I can't remember the speaker's name. I feel so bad. But he had made a great point about at some point as you go higher up in your education, you become a double agent where your hand and your like your spirit and like basically your spirit and like let's say like a foot, just for lack of better phrasing, like half of you is still with um the social kind of advocate version of yourself where you're advocating and fighting for all the things that your community or other communities want and need. Then the other half of you is like now a part of the community of which you were fighting against. And that's hard. And that's kind of like not saying that's what you're going through, but it's like that experience of like you at some point were getting removed from what was happening in your home country and coming back there. It was like, oh shoot, like this is a new environment I have to learn. And so that's real. And that's kind of an experience that I want to highlight as like it's a very interesting feeling of feeling like a double agent. Right?
Yes.
Like I'm now slowly becoming a part of the community that I'm kind of like about, but also socially aware of like, okay, now I need to be more cognizant of like how removed I am and how do I stay connected and like how do I step back and allow other voices to be heard, even though I was previously said voice that needed to be heard. It's just a whole nother thing.
Only you could have said that the way you said it.
I got it from you.
Truth.
Okay. So, hi guys, this is Tyra Parrish, your host for this episode, and we have reached the end of part 1 of this conversation with this amazing speaker. Don't click out yet because part 2 to this conversation has already been posted. So go ahead and click over to the next page, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and Spotify page.